the great conservative movement of America and of our time. A brush fire of freedom that's being lit all over this country. We, as an irate, tireless American populace, will overcome the few radical leftists that control the levers of power today. Joe Biden's failed economic policies has given us inflation like you can't believe, and the border is in disarray.
It's amazing how few of the people commenting on this have actually bothered to go see what's happening. Well, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona actually went to the border.
Biggs, where's Andy? Boy, oh boy, Andy. There's a guy. He's tough.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Biggs, Congressman from Arizona's 5th Congressional District. I'm so glad you joined us on my semi-regular podcast called What's the Biggs Idea? I am so excited about our guest today. He's a friend. He's a great congressman from Georgia's 11th Congressional District. He was first elected in 2014. He is chairman of the House Administration Committee's Subcommittee on Oversight. He serves also on the Financial Services Committee. He's a U.S. Air Force veteran. And prior to his election in the U.S. House of Representatives, he has served in the Georgia General Assembly in both the State House and Senate. He's a great member. He's a fighter. He's a warrior. He's my friend from Georgia, Barry Loudermilk. Barry, thanks for joining me today.
Andy, it's good to be with you and to be alongside you in this fight. I mean, it's a very interesting time that we're in our country, but I sense that we're exposing some things that the American people suspected was going on, but we're getting to the root of it, exposing corruption all across the country. And I think we've got some big victories ahead of us.
Yeah, and I think so. And you're playing a fundamental role there that I think people need to understand what you're doing. I mean, you are the chairman of a subcommittee, and you are investigating the January 6th Select Committee. That's one of the tasks. That's not all you're doing, but that's one of the tasks you're doing. But the Select Committee was supposed to investigate the security failures that occurred on January 6th. Right. And so what did they find out about the security failures on January 6th?
That is a great question that we don't have an answer to. We were sold this idea that this select committee was going to look at the security failures on January 6th. They broke the select committee up into investigative teams, a red team, a blue team, and a green team. You know, the blue team was going to look at the security failures. Green team was going to look at the money flow, who financed the riots. And the red team was looking at Trump. But the final report that they submitted has nothing about security failures. To give you an example, and we brought this up in a hearing regarding the pipe bombs, as we were investigating the investigation of pipe bombs. I mean, we literally had civilians walking next to these devices after they were found. I mean, the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police never even put up a secure perimeter. So there's some real things that need to be looked at as far as security failures. And I highlighted in that hearing that the word Donald Trump is mentioned in their final report 1,900 times. The word pipe bomb is mentioned in passing 5 times. So that tells you what really the report was about. So not only was there not much in the report at all regarding security failures, when Kevin McCarthy appointed me chairman of this committee, and I told Kevin I would take it under 2 conditions. One, that we were given the resources and the personnel we needed to conduct this investigation. And 2, that I would get to the truth without any political influence. And right. He assured me that we would have both. In fact, that on this investigation, we would report directly to the speaker. And this is taking about 95% of my time in the Capitol right now. But we were also supposed to receive all the documents that the Select Committee had received. When we go in and start looking at it, we can't find hardly anything on security failures. It's like their blue team never existed. Either that, they didn't do any work, or the blue team uncovered something that they weren't supposed to, which is my suspicion, and they were halted in their work, and basically their documents
Wow.
were came up missing. And so it's like they never did their job. Now, one thing to keep in mind is this select committee was given a broad amount of authority, but they were banned from asking any documents from Speaker Pelosi's office.
Well, that gets to that's really interesting. So let's unpack a little bit about what you said, because there's so much you just said. You said you're talking about that they didn't even cordon off the pipe bomb where they found pipe bombs. People were just walking by. That's a kind of a security failure right there. But then on the other hand, they hardly even mentioned that in the report, but they mentioned Donald Trump 1,900 times. And that gets to one of the conclusions you guys kind of made, that this was kind of a narrative building exercise as much as anything. Explain that conclusion to me, because I want to read it to just the title of it from your key findings. The Select Committee was designed to promote a political narrative. And then you go on to explain that in a paragraph or two in the summary, but then you guys go into much more detail in the report that was released.
Yeah, it really goes back to even the structure of the committee. As you know, we were there during this time period. Kevin McCarthy was supposed to, as with any select committee, the minority gets so many appointees. Nancy Pelosi didn't like who he appointed, so she vetoed him, which has never been done in history before. And then she made her own appointments. Now, keep in mind, she had 8 appointments to this committee. One of her selections was Liz Cheney. Liz was one of the selections made by the Democrats. She wasn't one that was going to be on the Republican side. Even when Kevin made his appointments, she already selected Liz Cheney. She vetoed 2 or 3 of the folks that Kevin wanted. And so we're like, we're not going to participate in this kangaroo court. And so she then appointed Adam Kinzinger. So we had 2 Republicans on there, but one of those that she actually appointed herself. So the makeup of the committee had already cast the die, as there was not going to be any objective voice on the committee itself. From what we've learned is Liz Cheney basically took over the committee from Benny Thompson. We have informants who were actually members or staff on the committee who have even said that publicly, that everything significantly changed when Liz Cheney effectively took control. What they did was had a predetermined narrative that they were going to go into this. Was their final report was going to report that Donald Trump basically organized the attacks on January 6th, and he was solely responsible for that. And again, I went into this, Andy, seriously as unbiased. I was going to just get to the truth of what happened. Now, going into this, they have made accusations against me, you, Jim Jordan, and we knew that they lied about it. I mean, I knew they lied about their accusation. I gave reconnaissance tours, and the accusations they made about you. And Jim Jordan had actually caught them editing evidence to make him look like he had done something. So we knew from their report they were making up stories, but I didn't know how deep it went until we started digging in to the evidence that they were supposed to preserve. Now, they conducted several hundred transcribed interviews of witnesses. So we took all these documents that they handed us and started going through them, trying to figure out what we had. As we were going through over 1 million printed pages of information, we realized we were missing some key documents. We knew that they had interviewed members of the Secret Service detail that was with Trump. We didn't have any of those transcribed interviews. We knew that they had interviewed White House employees that were with Donald Trump that day. We didn't have any of those. But the biggest thing, then, which I think was the most egregious, is I got a call from the gentleman who was Cassidy Hutchinson's first lawyer. Right. And he called and he said, look, they fired him after she did 3 interviews, and then Liz Cheney hired an attorney for her. And that's when her story started changing. But he said, look,
make that point again.
Right. Okay. So we'll back up a little bit. Cassidy Hutchinson, who, as you said, was their star witness. She did 3 transcribed interviews with her original attorney, and I can use his name now, Stefan Pasentino. He was representing her as well as other people that were being called in from the White House. And what everyone will tell you is Stefan is a Boy Scout when it comes to doing his job. He's going to do it by the book. He's going to do it according to law, very ethically. So he's representing her. In her first 3 interviews, she pretty much tells the same story that everyone else that they had talked to from the White House is telling. After her 3rd interview, she has a meeting with Liz Cheney. Now, Liz and Cassidy write about this in their books. So they have a meeting after her 3rd transcribed interview. After they have that personal meeting without her attorney present, which is an ethical violation, if not a legal violation, she fires Stefan as her attorney. Liz Cheney provides her with a new attorney working pro bono. After she gets the new attorney, then Liz Cheney calls her in for a 4th transcribed interview or deposition. But instead of this one happening like all the others, where they go into the committee room, they have other members of the committee as well as the staff attorneys in there asking the questions. This interview is only between Liz Cheney and Cassidy Hutchinson with Cassidy's new attorney present, a videographer, and a court reporter. That's it. Liz did not even inform the other members of the select committee she was doing this interview. This is where they came up with the sensational stories of President Trump throwing food. He got so mad at Bill Barr, he threw food in the cafeteria, that he was so angry that the Secret Service wouldn't take him to the Capitol on January 6th. He tried to choke a Secret Service agent and tried to pry the steering wheel from another. That's where these sensational stories came about. After that transcribed interview, Liz Cheney takes the video from that interview and shows it to the rest of the committee. And the committee, then they decide, wow, we've got to get this young lady before the entire world. So they schedule an immediate emergency televised hearing without corroborating her story with anyone. And that's where we get to where she comes out in June, and it comes out with these, crazy, sensational stories that become the narrative for the rest of the report at that point. Now, regarding the videos, we know, and Liz Cheney even reports this in her book, that it was extremely important that they videotape every deposition and transcribed interview that they do. And so when Stefan calls me at the beginning of this, he said, look, there are groups that have filed ethics complaints against him to try to get him disbarred from the DC bar and the Georgia bar and New York bar, which, as of just a few weeks ago, he has been totally exonerated from all of those. It's a huge victory for him because he did nothing wrong.
Right. Right.
So he was trying to fight this because it's killing him. I mean, he's losing business left and right because he's being accused of violating law and legal standards. But he said the proof that I did not do anything wrong is in the videotape of the 3rd interview. So all he wanted for me to do is to provide that tape. And I said, sure, if we've got it, we'll get it for you. So our team started looking and found out we did not have any of the videos, none. They were all missing, which is something that, according to House rules and the House clerk's guidelines for preserving information, you have to preserve that. But there were none. The only thing we had were just little snippets of certain interviews that they used in their television production. So we immediately wrote to Thompson. Yes.
Let's unpack that for a second.
Okay.
So you have 3 videotaped interviews of Cassidy Hutchinson.
Yes.
That are consistent with all the other witnesses and all the other testimony. I assume that those were available to the other committee members before the 4th interview. Okay. Then you get this. Then you get a new attorney. You get what looks like collusion between Liz Cheney and Cassidy Hutchinson to change their story and come up with some fantastic myth. And then when you take over, those videos of the consistent, basically exculpatory evidence, they're gone.
They're gone. They're not in existence. I even write the chairman, former chairman Benny Thompson, a letter saying, "Where are these?" And he responded saying, "We didn't have to keep them, so we chose not to." I was like, okay, come on. So look, I'm relentless. I'm not going to take that. So we start looking, what are other avenues we could find them? Well, the House Recording Studio normally records all of these depositions. I mean, when we do them, if they're video recorded, we just call the House Recording Studio. So my investigative team contacts the House Recording Studio. They inform us that the select committee used a little different process that was unique. They didn't allow the House Recording Studio to come and do the recording. They only borrowed their equipment and had their own videographers, their own production teams that handled them. So the House never had copies of these to start with. I'm sure they exist somewhere. We're still looking for them.
So do you know who the videographers were? Is there some kind of NDA, non-disclosure agreement between the videographers and Liz Cheney or something? I mean, that is just so outrageous.
We're looking into who the staff members were, whether they just used someone or they did contract several services out. And so we're looking at contractors too to get these. These are House records. I mean, we've been able to work around other things. We've been able to obtain other records that they were trying to keep us from getting. And so we're going to keep going until we get these. And our investigation is going to continue on. I mean, we do have now we don't have all of them, but we have most transcriptions, printed form transcriptions, which Benny Thompson told me in the letter. He said, you ought to be happy with that. You have them all in a written form. They're all transcribed, but it is a big difference between a video and a written transcription. First of all, there's interaction, sidebars that take place that you're not going to see. There's also body language and voice inflection that is important. It's like our good friend Morgan Griffith. He's on the subcommittee, and we were talking about this, and he said, the videos are so important because there is a big difference between answering the question, "I shot the clerk," versus "I shot the clerk." I mean, that's a huge difference, right? So it's extremely important. In fact, Liz Cheney writes in her book how important it was to video record all of these depositions because that's where the truth lies. But she doesn't address the fact that they're gone. They don't exist, on top of other information that just seemed to disappear. And what we saw was this trend of the information we were trying to dig to find that we knew was missing. I thought perhaps this is exculpatory information. Maybe what they're doing is only hiding the things that contradict what Cassidy Hutchinson said. And so far that theory is proving true. So
yeah, well, and that leads to the next question. I mean, so Cassidy Hutchinson all of a sudden changes her story, and you've got this fantastic, crazy story. But that's contradicted by other depositions.
It is, and also look at the time frame. I mean, they took her testimony, hook, line, and sinker, that this was the truth. This was so fantastic. This is awesome. This is the truth. So I told our team, as we acquire other pieces of evidence and look at depositions we have, I want you to look at not only how they answer questions, but also look at the questions being asked to them by the committee. And more importantly, what questions are not asked by the committee. And I can give you a great example of how I can confidently say that this entire committee, their whole purpose was to legislatively prosecute Donald Trump, not get to the truth. They had a predetermined narrative and they weren't going to let anything get in that way. And this is the proof of that. So if Cassidy Hutchinson, if you were conducting a real investigation and all of a sudden someone who testified 3 times to events one way, then all of a sudden changes their testimony, first of all, they've perjured themselves, right? They've lied to Congress at some point. Would you take their testimony serious? I wouldn't, but apparently Liz and gang did. But if they came and told me these sensational stories before I went public with it, I would want to go and get firsthand accounts. So keep in mind, she never saw Trump in the SUV. She heard somebody else talking about it. She never saw Trump throwing food. She just heard somebody else talk about it. She never heard Trump say, yeah, Mike Pence should be hung. She only heard somebody talking about it. I jokingly refer to her testimony as the REO Speedwagon testimony. If you remember, heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from another, right? Well, with that, I would definitely say, well, let's go and get the Secret Service agents that were with him and under oath, ask them questions. President Biden waived executive privilege so they could come and do this. Well, we didn't have their testimonies. So we've been fighting with Homeland Security because what happened is Benny Thompson sent all those transcribed interviews to Homeland Security, did not preserve them ourselves, sent the White House interviews to the White House for them to keep and archive. These are House documents. So we've been fighting and fighting and fighting. We finally were able to get the access to the White House documents, and we've released one of those. We'll be releasing more. We also, in the coming days, will have access to all of the Secret Service documents. But we were able to get a redacted copy of the driver of the SUV, his transcribed interview. Now, Cassidy Hutchinson made her sensational claims in June. They did not interview the driver of the SUV until September. Now, Andy, this is the thing that amazed me the most. Not only did his interview contradict a lot of what Cassidy Hutchins was saying, they never asked him once in the interview about the charge that Trump tried to grab the steering wheel from him. They never asked him about that, which tells you they didn't want to hear his answer. He had to interject himself that this never happened. And I believe him 100% because, if you go into these depositions, your attorney's going to tell you, do not answer any question that they did not ask you because they could be trying to catch you into perjury. So here's this guy, he's being forced to testify. He gets to the end of his testimony. Do you really think he's going to say, hey, they didn't give me a chance to perjure myself, so I'm just going to make up a story and interject it now? No, he's upset because of the injustice that's being done, and he wants the truth out there. So he interjects at the, honestly, the attorneys for the committee tried to shut him down, but he was able to interject that story never happened. Now, have you ever seen that transcribed interview? No. Did anyone even know it existed? No, they didn't. This is the type of thing that the Select Committee suppressed, this type of information. Liz Cheney will come out and say, oh, you can go to our website, read the report, and go to the drop-down links, and there is all this supporting information that you can read. That's fine, Liz. But what I want to see is the unsupporting information. That's where the truth is, not what supports your narrative, but what doesn't. And that's what they suppressed and included, I believe, deleted some of that.
That is amazing stuff. I mean, the fact that House, but I just think people need to know this, that the House archives virtually everything that happens in the House. Yes. Depositions, interviews, hearings, floor votes, debates. If I get on the floor and I make a statement, it's recorded, it's videotaped, and they will come up to you and they'll do the same thing. Anybody who's down there, they'll say, do you have a written copy of that?
Yes.
Because they'll take whatever notes you might have and they'll put them in. I'll say, well, I just had a couple of bullet points, and they'll say, well, we'll take those. They want everything. And they have it as an archive, as a historical record. And sometimes when there's a controversy or a scandal, because people need to have that stuff. And you have a committee chairman, Benny Thompson, who allowed these videotapes, these depositions to go unpreserved.
Right.
And that smells real bad, Barry. That smells real bad.
It does.
So what's Benny's response to that? Well, why'd you let it go, Benny?
Well, he doesn't give any reason for getting rid of the videotapes. I pressed him on, why did you send these documents to the White House and Homeland Security? And he claimed that there were security and national security issues involved with it. I will give this, that once we were able to get to the White House documents, we fought with the White House over and over again. They finally sent us redacted copies of them that were very heavily redacted, by the way. But just reading the unredacted portions of it, we realized there's information here that is contradictory to Cassidy Hutchinson. No wonder they sent him off. Then the White House started working with their military office, because most of these were military, apolitical folks, and the military office is just concerned of protecting their identities, because they weren't political; they were just there doing their job, and I understand that. So they allowed us to come over and read the full unredacted copies. And there'll be some portions that we're going to work with them to unredact, but there are some areas in there dealing with presidential movements and that type of thing that probably should be secured. But the important thing is that their testimonies contradicted most of everything that Cassidy Hutchinson said. Now, Homeland Security hasn't been as open with us until and we haven't even released this yet, but they are going to allow us to go in the next few days to look at some of the documents they have. But they've been unresponsive. Finally, when we forced them, we used the S word subpoena. They at least started communicating with us and said they're reviewing them. They're still reviewing them for security reasons. Goodness gracious, it's been 3 years. Come on. How long is it going to take? We know they're slow walking it. But as we started getting some of this, there was still something that was missing, because when I wrote one of my letters to Benny Thompson, I started telling him that, we're missing all these documents. And he responded saying, look, we gave you 4.5 terabytes of digital data, but we only had less than 3 terabytes. They gave us 5 hard drives that were supposed to contain everything. I'm like, so what's up with this? So we hired an outside forensics company to do a low-level scrubbing of these hard drives. Now, this is going to sound shocking, and it's not as damning as it first seems, but they recovered 10,000 deleted documents. Now, when they started giving us a report of what was deleted, we immediately started comparing it to other digital documents we found, and found that the majority of those deleted were just copies of what we already had. Mm-hmm. But there was about 120 that were unique. And the majority of those were password protected that we couldn't get into. But there were a few that weren't. And some of these that weren't were deleted literally 2 days before we took the majority, 2 days before the committee ended. Wow. And one of those was related to the White House transcribed interviews that they sent to the White House. That's how we knew to look for them and who was involved. That was deleted just 2 days before we took the majority. Okay, if that's not suspicious, I'm sorry. It's, I've got to look into that. So again, crazy. I went to Benny Thompson. I'm like, hey, what's the password to these 117 or so encrypted documents? His response was, I don't have any clue what you're talking about. Yeah. And he may not, because it was pretty much Liz Cheney running the entire show. So we're still trying. Wow. We've even hired a company to try to get to crack the encryption on these documents. Most of them are PDFs, and they've been unsuccessful doing it. So we're going to keep pushing till somebody knows that password, so we can look at the documents. And it may be copies of what we have, but why do you secure these documents with password protection? And the fact that we recovered them from being deleted tells me that they were password protected, not to keep us from getting them, but to get other members of the committee from getting them, because they were deleted with the encryption in place. So it makes me believe that they were encrypted during the investigation, so only select people could get to them. So, which really piques my interest. I really want to see what these documents are.
Well, Barry, hey, this has been fascinating. We're out of time. This has gone by so fast. You've given us so much information, and your committee's doing great work. You're leading that committee. You're doing a great job. We're going to have you back on as this continues, and you Absolutely. Guys continue your investigation. This is. I'm telling you, this is a scandal of historic proportions, and you're right at the heart of revealing it and uncovering it. And what a travesty! What a travesty Absolutely. We've seen. I commend you for what you're doing. I thank you for joining me today. I wish we had more time, but I'm afraid that they always pull the plug on me pretty close to the magic moment. I don't want them to pull the plug on us while we're talking. So I thank you, Barry Loudermilk from Georgia's 11th district. Doing a great job in his subcommittee chairmanship work in the House of Representatives. We'll have you back on. Please join me next time for another edition of What's the Big's Idea with me, Andy Biggs from Arizona's 5th Congressional District. Thanks, Barry. Thank you for joining us, everybody.
Thank you, Andy.